Welcome to HAZCOM training. This is an introduction to hazard communication and GHS. Hazardous chemicals are needed to help manufacture many of the products that we use on a daily basis. In fact, 1 out of every 4 workers in the US comes into contact with hazardous chemicals while on the job. Over 60 million chemical substances have been developed and are constantly being transported via our streets, highways, and railway systems. The potential for accidents, incidents, and injuries is always present when people work with or in vicinity of hazardous chemicals. But by knowing and understanding the basic nature of those chemicals and how to safely work with or around them, people can greatly decrease any risk that might be present. This training is designed to help you understand more about chemicals and the methods used to provide you with the information about their hazards. Specifically, it covers how to keep yourself safe through education on the hazard communication standard. After completing this training, you'll be able to describe how the hazard communication standard keeps you safe from dangers of hazardous chemicals, identify who is responsible for determining a chemical's hazards, and recognize common hazards of chemicals. OSHA's Hazard Communication Standard, or HAZCOM standard, requires that your employer inform you of the chemicals which are being used in the workplace, the hazards associated with each of them, and how to protect yourself from these potential dangers. The HAZCOM standard exists to help prevent injuries and illness. OSHA says that employees have the right to know and understand the hazards of chemicals they're exposed to in the workplace. The chemical manufacturer or importer develops hazard information for each chemical. That information needs to be documented and shared with each company and the person who handles that chemical. This includes suppliers, transporters, and everyone to the final end user. Your employer has requirements as well. They need to provide you with the information and training necessary for you to do your job safely. So, as part of the HAZCOM standard, your employer is required to provide you with the knowledge and training necessary for you to do your job safely. The standard requires that your employer create an inventory of all hazardous chemicals at the workplace, ensure each chemical has an SDS that is easily accessible to all workers who are exposed to the chemicals, ensure each chemical container is properly labeled with an approved label, create and provide training for workers, and develop and maintain a written HAZCOM program that details plans for communicating chemical hazards and risks. The OSHA HAZCOM standard is aligned with the global harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals, otherwise known as GHS. GHS is a worldwide accepted system used for the classification and communication of hazards. OSHA adopted the GHS hazard definitions, container label elements, and SDS format. Next, chemical classifications. Hazard communication begins at the chemical manufacturing plant. The manufacturer or importer must identify any hazards of chemicals they offer. Then, they must decide whether the chemical will be classified as hazardous. If the chemical meets this definition, the manufacturer or importer must then determine the degree of physical or health hazards where appropriate. As a part of HAZCOM standard, your employer is required to develop and maintain a chemical inventory. This is a list of all hazardous chemicals in the workplace. When a chemical arrives at your workplace, the hazard information is passed along with it. OSHA requires that each company to keep a complete and up-to-date inventory of all of its hazardous chemicals. This list makes sure all of the hazardous chemicals on site are identified. Next, hazards of chemicals. The HAZCOM standard defines hazardous chemicals as as any chemical which is classified as having a physical or health hazard. This could be an asphyxiant, a combustible dust, pyrophoric gas, or hazard not otherwise classified. A physical hazard can cause a fire, explosion, or some other form of violent reaction. Chemicals that threaten people's health are called health hazards and can enter the body in one of three ways: inhalation, skin contact, or ingestion. These chemicals can affect your health right away or cause problems over a long period of time. OSHA considers any chemical to be a health hazard if it is toxic, corrosive, or irritating to the skin or eyes, a respiratory sensitizer, a cause of cancer, birth defects, or reproductive issues, harmful to specific organs in the body, or harmful or deadly when inhaled. An asphyxiant is a gas that's essentially non toxic but can cause unconsciousness or death. It does this by lowering the concentration of oxygen in the air or by totally replacing the oxygen in the air that you breathe. Pyrophoric gases are substances that ignite spontaneously at room temperature. Combustible dust is any combustible material, and some materials normally considered non-combustible that can burn rapidly when in a finely divided form. There are also some known hazards which do not fall into the established hazard classifications. So OSHA created another category called HNOC, or hazard not otherwise classified, to ensure all hazard information about a chemical reaches the end user. This training was designed to help you understand more about chemicals and the methods used to provide you with the information about their hazards. Specifically, it covered how to keep yourself safe through the education of the Hazard Communication Standard. You should now be able to describe how the Hazard Communication Standard keeps you safe from the dangers of hazardous chemicals, identify who is responsible for determining a chemical's hazard, and recognize common hazards of chemicals.